When my daughter-in-law stood up at our family dinner 6 months after the wedding and announced to everyone that I was a fraud, a liar, and had humiliated her entire family with my pathetic charade, I watched 20 pairs of eyes turn toward me with a mixture of confusion and judgment. My son sat frozen beside her, his face unreadable. The crystal chandelier above us seemed to blur as tears filled my eyes, but what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been prepared for this moment, and I had evidence that would turn her accusations into the greatest mistake of her life. My name is Me, and this is a story about a mother's love, a terrible mistake born from good intentions, and how sometimes the truth is far more complicated than it appears. Let me take you back to where this all started, 18 months ago, when I made a decision that would change everything. I raised my son Marcus as a single mother after his father passed away when Marcus was only 8 years old. 23 years later, I can tell you that every sacrifice was worth it. I worked 2 jobs for 15 years, administrative assistant during the day, weekend shifts at a hospital cafeteria. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood, drove a reliable but aging Honda, and saved every penny I could for Marcus's education. My son graduated from college debt, free because of those sacrifices. He became a software engineer at a respected tech company, making more money by age 26 than I'd made in my best 3 years combined. I was so proud I could barely contain it. Marcus had a good heart like his father. He called me every Sunday without fail, took me to dinner once a month, and never once made me feel like my simple life was something to be ashamed of. Then he met Vanessa. She was beautiful in that polished, intimidating way, always perfectly dressed, hair styled like she'd stepped out of a magazine, nails that looked like tiny works of art. She worked in marketing at a luxury hotel chain, came from what she called old money, and her parents lived in a gated community with a name I couldn't pronounce. The first time Marcus brought her to my apartment for Sunday dinner, I watched her eyes scan my mismatched furniture, my worn carpet, my kitchen with the cabinet door that never quite closed right. Cozy, she'd said, and the pause before cozy told me everything I needed to know. But I loved my son, and he seemed happy with her, so I smiled and served pot roast on my everyday dishes and pretended not to notice when she took photographs of her food but barely touched it. Over the next year, I saw Marcus less and less. The Sunday calls became every other Sunday, then monthly. Dinners stopped altogether. When I asked about it, he'd say they were busy with wedding planning, that Vanessa's family had a lot of events that work was demanding. Looking back, I should have noticed when he started making excuses about why I couldn't meet Vanessa's parents. They're traveling, he'd say, or they're not really the casual dinner type, Mom. But I was just so grateful to still be included in his life at all that I didn't push. The engagement announcement came via text message with a photo of her ring that probably cost more than my car. She said yes. We're thinking a spring wedding. Love you, Mom. I cried happy tears that night, alone in my apartment, holding my phone and looking at my son's smiling face in that photo. The first real warning came on a Tuesday afternoon in January. I was at work, filing medical records when my phone rang. Marcus's name lit up the screen. He rarely called during work hours. Mom, hey, do you have a minute? Something in his voice made my hands go cold. Of course, honey. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, exactly. It's just, Vanessa and I were talking, and he paused, and I could hear muffled conversation in the background, like someone was coaching him. Her family is pretty traditional, very focused on appearances and social standing. And with the wedding coming up, there's going to be a lot of important people there. Business associates, family friends, you know. I didn't know, but I said okay. And Vanessa's been getting some questions from her mom about you. About your situation, what you do, where you live, that kind of thing. My throat tightened, I see. Look, Mom, I love you, you know that. But Vanessa's worried that if her family and their friends find out that you're I mean that you work in a cafeteria and live in. Another pause. She thinks it might reflect poorly on me. On us, she asked if maybe you could embellish a little, just for the wedding. Just to make things easier. I sat down in my desk chair, feeling like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. Embellish? Just tell people you're retired or that you run your own consulting business, something like that, and maybe dress up a bit more than usual. Vanessa said her mom knows some boutiques where we could find you something appropriate. His voice got quieter. I know it's a lot to ask, Mom, but it would really mean a lot to us, to me. I should have said no right then. I should have told him that I was proud of my work, that I had nothing to be ashamed of, that if Vanessa's family couldn't accept me as I was, then maybe they weren't the right family to marry into. But all I heard was it would really mean a lot to me. And I remembered every sacrifice I'd made for this boy, every dream I'd set aside so he could achieve his. Okay, I whispered, I'll do it. The relief in his voice was immediate. Thanks, Mom, you're the best. Vanessa will be so happy. I'll text you some details about what to say. Okay. Love you. He hung up before I could respond. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, feeling something twist in my chest that I'd never felt regarding my son before. It felt like shame. But whose shame was it? Mine for being who I was, or his for asking me to hide it? The next 3 months became a masterclass in deception that I never wanted to attend. Vanessa's instructions came through Marcus in detailed text messages that read like scripts for a play I hadn't auditioned for. Tell people you're a retired healthcare consultant who specialized in hospital administration. Say you sold your consulting business 5 years ago and now you focus on philanthropy. When asked where you live, be vague. Say something like a quiet community in the suburbs. Don't mention specific brands or stores. Just say you prefer boutique designers. The dress they bought me for the wedding cost $1,800. I saw the receipt when I opened the box. It was beautiful. Deep navy silk with delicate beading that caught the light. It came with matching shoes that pinched my feet and a clutch purse smaller than my wallet. Vanessa also sent me to her salon where a young woman with pink streaks in her hair styled my graying hair into an elegant updo that made me look like someone I didn't recognize. But the real transformation came in the lies I had to memorize. Vanessa created an entire false biography for me, complete with the name of my consulting firm, Brightwater Healthcare Solutions. I had to practice saying it without laughing. The luxury condo building where I supposedly lived. The Riverview Estates, a place I'd driven past but never entered. And even the name of the charity I supposedly donated to the Henderson Foundation for Children's Education. I'd never heard of it. You need to be convincing, Vanessa told me during our one and only face-to-face coaching session. At an expensive cafe I never would have entered on my own. She slid a manila folder across the table. This has everything you need to know. Study it. Memorize it. My mother is very perceptive, and my father has business connections everywhere. If they find out the truth, it will humiliate. Marcus, you don't want to humiliate your son on his wedding day, do you? The way she said my name, like it was something distasteful on her tongue, made my hands clench under the table. But I looked at that folder, thinking of Marcus, and I nodded. I'll do whatever it takes. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Good, because we're paying for this wedding, and we expect everything to be perfect, including you. That night, I went home to my little apartment, sat on my worn couch, and opened that folder. Inside were printed sheets detailing my fake life, complete with conversation starters, appropriate responses to common questions, and even a list of do's and don'ts. For my behavior at the wedding and reception, don't mention your actual job or apartment. Don't discuss financial struggles or working class concerns. Don't take excessive photos or act starstruck. By the venue, do maintain an air of comfortable wealth and understated elegance. Do keep conversations brief and redirect questions back to the asker. Do remember that you represent Marcus now, not just yourself. I read that last line over and over. You represent Marcus now, not just yourself. As if the real me, the woman who had raised him with everything I had, wasn't good enough to represent the man he'd become. I cried that night, but when I woke up the next morning, I made a decision. I would play their game. I would be the perfect, fake mother they wanted, not because I was ashamed of myself, but because I loved my son enough to become invisible for him. What I didn't realize was that invisibility can be a dangerous thing. When you erase yourself to make others comfortable, you give them permission to erase you completely. The wedding took place on a perfect Saturday in April at a country club that looked like it belonged in a movie about rich people. Rolling green lawns, a stone mansion with columns, a fountain in the circular driveway that probably cost more than my annual salary. I arrived in the dress, the shoes, the hair, the whole costume, feeling like an actress in a production I hadn't rehearsed enough for. Vanessa's mother, Patricia, greeted me in the marble foyer with air kisses that didn't touch my cheeks. She was an older, sharper version of her daughter, with jewelry that looked like it came with its own security detail. "Me, darling, how wonderful to finally meet you properly," she said, her eyes scanning me from head to toe in an assessment that felt both clinical and judgmental. "Marcus has told us so much about your consulting work, health care administration, wasn't it? Such a demanding field." My mouth went dry. This was it. The performance was beginning. Yes, it was. But I've been retired for several years now. These days I focus on other interests. "How lovely, and you're at the Riverview Estates. I have a friend in that building, Margaret Chen. Do you know her?" My heart stopped. This was a test. I had no idea if Margaret Chen was real, or if Patricia was trying to catch me in the lie. "The name sounds familiar," I said carefully, "but I keep to myself mostly. I value my privacy." Patricia's smile sharpened. "Of course, well, enjoy the wedding, darling. It's going to be spectacular." She walked away, and I stood there feeling like I'd just barely survived the first round of an interrogation. But what happened next shocked even me. The wedding ceremony itself was beautiful. I sat in the third row on the groom's side, surrounded by people I didn't know, watching my son promise his life to a woman who had asked me to lie about mine. Marcus looked handsome in his tuxedo, and when he saw Vanessa walking down the aisle, his face lit up with genuine love. In that moment, I thought maybe it had all been worth it. Maybe the lies didn't matter if he was happy. The reception was held in a ballroom with crystal chandeliers and tables decorated with flowers that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I was seated at a table with some of Vanessa's distant relatives and a couple who introduced themselves as Marcus's boss and his wife. "You must be so proud," the wife said to me kindly. "Marcus is brilliant. Tom says he's one of the most talented engineers they've hired in years." "I am proud," I said, and those were the first true words I'd spoken all day. "He's always been special. And you were in healthcare consulting?" Tom asked, sipping his champagne. "That's fascinating. What made you decide to retire?" I launched into the script Vanessa had written for me, talking about wanting more flexibility, pursuing philanthropic interests, enjoying a slower pace of life. The lies came out smoothly now. Practiced and polished, Tom nodded along, seeming to accept every word. But then Vanessa's father, Richard, appeared at our table. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention without trying. He extended his hand to me. "Mrs. Henderson, I don't believe we've been properly introduced. Richard Crane, Vanessa's father." "Please call me," I said, shaking his hand. "Me then. Marcus tells me you ran a healthcare consulting firm before retiring. I'm actually on the board of Sterling Regional Hospital. I'm always interested in meeting people from the healthcare administration world. What was your firm's specialty?" My blood went cold. A hospital board member would know immediately if I didn't know what I was talking about. I could feel sweat forming under the expensive dress. "We focused on operational efficiency and staff management," I said, praying that was vague enough. Interesting. Who were your primary clients? This was it. I was going to be exposed right here at the reception, and Marcus would be humiliated and everything would fall apart. But before I could answer, a voice cut in. Daddy, I need to borrow you for photos. Vanessa appeared beside her father, her hand on his arm, her smile bright but her eyes locked on me with something that looked like warning. The photographer is waiting. Richard nodded apologetically. We'll continue this conversation later, me. I'd love to hear more about your work. They walked away, and I sat there trembling. The wife next to me patted my hand. Are you all right? You look pale. Just overwhelmed, I said. It's such a big day. But what I didn't know was that things were about to get even worse. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of anxiety. I danced with Marcus during the mother-son dance, feeling like a fraud in his arms. The DJ played a song for Mama, and my son whispered, "Thank you for being here, Mom." Thank you for doing this. I wanted to tell him that I shouldn't have had to do anything, that I should have been enough just as I was. But I held my tongue and smiled and let him believe that everything was perfect. After the dance, I retreated to a quiet corner of the ballroom, nursing a glass of water and watching the celebration from a distance. That's when I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Two women I didn't recognize were standing near the dessert table, speaking in the kind of loud whisper that meant they wanted to be overheard. Did you see the groom? Mother, one said. Patricia told me she's supposedly some retired healthcare consultant, but Karen said she looked her up and couldn't find any record of a Brightwater Healthcare Solutions anywhere. Really? The other woman said, delighted by the gossip. You think she made it up? Patricia thinks there's something off about her. She asked Richard to do some digging. Can you imagine lying about your background at your own son's wedding? How desperate would you have to be? They moved away, laughing, and I stood there feeling like the floor had opened up beneath me. Patricia was investigating me. She knew something was wrong. It was only a matter of time before the whole lie came crashing down. I found the restroom and locked myself in a stall, trying to breathe through the panic. What had I done? I had thought I was protecting Marcus, but now I was putting him in a position where his mother would be exposed as a liar in front of everyone who mattered to him. This was going to be so much worse than if I'd just been honest from the beginning. When I finally emerged, I found Marcus and Vanessa preparing to leave for their honeymoon. I hugged my son, breathing in his familiar scent, wondering if this might be the last time he'd want to touch me once the truth came out. Love you, Mom, he said. We'll see you when we get back from Bali. I love you too, baby, I whispered. Vanessa gave me one of her air kisses. Thank you for everything, she said, and the emphasis on everything felt like both acknowledgement and threat. I drove home that night still wearing the expensive dress, feeling like Cinderella after midnight, except my carriage hadn't turned back into a pumpkin. I had. I was going back to being regular me, the cafeteria worker, the woman who wasn't good enough to be herself at her own son's wedding. I hung the dress in my closet next to my work uniforms and sat on my bed for a long time, just staring at nothing. Marcus and Vanessa returned from their honeymoon 2 weeks later. I didn't hear from them for another 3 weeks after that. When Marcus finally called, his voice was strange tight and controlled in a way I'd never heard before. Mom, we need to talk. Can you come over to our place tomorrow evening around 6? Is everything okay? I asked, already knowing it wasn't. We'll talk tomorrow. He hung up, and I spent the next 24 hours with my stomach in knots, knowing that the reckoning was coming. Their apartment was in a new high-rise downtown, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture that looked uncomfortable but expensive. Vanessa answered the door, and the smile she usually wore, fake though it was, had been replaced with an expression of cold fury. Come in, she said curtly. Marcus was sitting on their white leather couch, his hands clasped between his knees, looking at the floor. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Sit down, me, Vanessa said, not offering me a drink or even taking my coat. I sat in a chair across from them, my purse clutched in my lap like a shield. Vanessa remained standing, arms crossed, looking down at me like a prosecutor about to deliver a closing argument. My father completed his research into your background. She began, her voice cold and controlled. Brightwater Health. Solutions doesn't exist. It never existed. The Riverview Estates has no record of a me Henderson as a resident. And the Henderson Foundation for Children's Education. You're not listed as a donor at any level. My mouth went dry. I looked at Marcus, but he was still staring at the floor, his face red. Every single thing you told people at our wedding was a lie. Vanessa continued, "Do you have any idea how humiliated we were when my father called me from his office to tell me he couldn't verify a single detail about your supposed career? Do you know what that makes us look like? I started, but she cut me off. You work in a hospital cafeteria, me. You live in a run-down apartment complex. You drive a car that's barely functional. And you came to our wedding pretending to be someone you're not, lying to my family, to our friends, to everyone who matters to us." The contempt in her voice hit me like a physical blow. But what hurt more was that Marcus still wasn't looking at me, still wasn't defending me. "Vanessa," I said quietly, finding my voice. "Marcus asked me to do this," he said. I told her to embellish a little. Marcus finally looked up, his face anguished. "Not create an entire fake life, not make up a whole company and a job and a place where you live. God, Mom, do you know what Vanessa's father said to me? He asked if I was ashamed of you. He asked if I was the kind of man who'd let his mother lie at his wedding instead of just being honest about where I came from." Tears stung my eyes. "You told me to do it. You said it would make things easier. You said, I didn't tell you to lie about everything." His voice rose. "I thought you'd just be vague about your job, maybe dress a little nicer. I didn't think you'd create a whole false identity." "You knew," I said, my voice shaking. "You knew what Vanessa wanted. You sent me those texts with all the details about what to say. You knew exactly what I was doing. That was Vanessa trying to help you blend in. Marcus said, not instructions for you to commit fraud. Fraud." I stood up now, anger replacing hurt. "Fraud. I pretended to be successful so your wife's family wouldn't look down on you. I wore a dress that cost more than I make in 2 weeks. I studied a script like an actress so I wouldn't embarrass you, and now you're acting like I did this on my own, like you didn't ask me to." "Lower your voice," Vanessa said coldly. "This isn't a cafeteria." The disdain in that word cafeteria, like it was something dirty, made something inside me crack. "You're right," I said quietly, looking at Vanessa. "It's not a cafeteria. In a cafeteria, people are honest about who they are. They don't ask others to pretend to be something they're not just to impress strangers." Vanessa's face went red. "Get out, Mom," Marcus started. "No," Vanessa cut him off. "She's embarrassed us enough. I want her out of our apartment now." I looked at my son, waiting for him to say something, to stand up for me, to remind his wife that I was his mother. But he just sat there, looking torn and miserable, but saying nothing. That's when I noticed something that changed everything. On the glass coffee table between us was a manila folder, similar to the one Vanessa had given me before the wedding. But this one was open, and I could see papers inside with a letterhead that read Prescott, Williams and Associates Family Law. My breath caught. Family law meant divorce lawyers or estate planning or, "What is that?" I asked, pointing to the folder. Vanessa moved to close it, but not before I saw the words at the top of the first page. "Petition for grandparents' visitation rights restriction. Are you pregnant?" The words came out before I could stop them. The look Vanessa and Marcus exchanged told me everything. "That's none of your concern," Vanessa said. "You're my son." I said to Marcus, ignoring her, "Are you having a baby?" He nodded slowly. "Vanessa's 3 months along. We weren't going to tell anyone yet, but given your behavior and your dishonesty, we've decided it's best to establish boundaries now." Vanessa finished, We're consulting with an attorney about limiting your access to our child. We don't want our son or daughter growing up around someone who lies so easily and has such poor judgment. The room seemed to tilt. They were going to keep me from my grandchild because I had lied at a wedding, because I had done exactly what they'd asked me to do. Marcus, I said, my voice breaking, please tell me you don't agree with this. He looked at me finally, and there were tears in his eyes. I don't know, Mom. I don't know who you are right now. The woman who raised me, she had integrity. She taught me to be honest, and then you did this, and He shook his head. I need time to think. I stood there, my whole world crumbling, and realized that I had made a terrible mistake. But not the one they thought. My mistake wasn't pretending to be wealthy and successful at the wedding. My mistake was believing that my son would protect me if things went wrong. My mistake was trusting that his love for me was stronger than his need to please his new wife. I understand, I said quietly. I'll go. I walked to the door, and Vanessa didn't say goodbye. Marcus stood up like he might follow me, but he didn't. I stepped into the hallway, and the door clicked shut behind me with a sound like finality. I made it to my car before the tears came. I sat in the parking garage of their expensive building, sobbing in a way I hadn't since Marcus's father died, feeling like I was losing my son all over again. But as I drove home through the city streets, something shifted inside me. The grief began to harden into something else, something clearer and colder, because here's what I realized. I had done what they asked. I had followed Vanessa's script, worn the dress she bought, told the lies she wrote, and now she was using that compliance against me, twisting it into evidence of my poor character. That wasn't fair, that wasn't right, and I was done accepting unfair treatment just to keep the peace. When I got home, I did something I should have done weeks ago. I started making phone calls. The next morning, I called in sick to work and sat down at my kitchen table with a notebook and pen. I was going to document everything, and I was going to find a way to prove what had really happened. First, I went through my phone and found every text message Marcus had sent me in the months before the wedding. I screenshotted each one, especially the ones with specific instructions about what to say and how to act. Tell people you're retired from consulting. Vanessa thinks you should mention the Riverview Estates. Make sure you talk about philanthropy if anyone asks about your interests. The messages were all there, a clear trail of evidence that I hadn't invented this deception on my own. I'd been coached, instructed, and scripted. Next, I found the receipt for the dress, $1,800, paid for with Vanessa's credit card, delivered to my address. I had the box it came in, with a handwritten note from Vanessa. Remember, elegant, understated wealth, you're playing a role. Don't forget your lines, playing a role. She'd written it down herself. Then I remembered the coaching session at the cafe. I'd paid for my coffee with my credit card, which meant there was a record of me being at that specific location on that specific date. I pulled up my bank statement and found it, $5.75 at the Laurel Room Cafe, January 28th, 2:15 p.m. I called the cafe and asked if they had security camera footage from that date. They said they kept footage for 6 months. I made an appointment to come in and request a copy. I was building a case, though I wasn't sure yet what I was going to do with it. But I knew that if Vanessa was consulting with lawyers, then I needed to be prepared to defend myself. The next call I made was harder. I dialed my son's number, and he answered on the third ring. Mom, Marcus, I need you to listen to me without interrupting. I said, can you do that? A pause. Okay. I love you. I have loved you since the moment you were born, and I would do anything for you. When you asked me to embellish my background for the wedding, I should have said no. I should have told you that I was proud of my life and my work, and if that wasn't good enough for Vanessa's family, then that was their problem, not mine. Mom, let me finish, but I didn't say no because I saw how important it was to you, and I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was being a good mother by making things easier. I was wrong, not because I lied, though that was wrong too, but because I taught you that it's okay to be ashamed of where you come from. that it's okay to ask someone you love to hide who they are to impress people who don't matter. Silence on the other end. I'm not going to apologize for loving you enough to do what you asked. I continued, but I am going to tell you this. If you let Vanessa take my grandchild away from me because I did exactly what you both asked me to do, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. Not because I'll make you regret it, but because you'll know, deep down, that it was wrong, that it was cruel, and that you became the kind of man who punishes his mother for loving him too much. My voice broke on the last words, but I kept going. I have all the text messages, Marcus, every instruction you sent me, every detail Vanessa gave me to memorize. I have the receipt for the dress she bought me. I have the note she wrote telling me I was playing a role. If she wants to make this a legal battle about my character and my judgment, I will show everyone exactly who decided what that role should be. I heard Marcus breathing on the other end, but he said nothing. I'm not threatening you, I said more softly. I'm just telling you the truth. I don't want to fight. I don't want lawyers and courts and ugly battles. I want to be your mom, and I want to be a grandmother to your child. But I'm not going to be erased, not anymore. She said you would do this. Marcus finally said, his voice quiet. She said you'd try to manipulate me. The words hit like a slap. Is that what you think this is, manipulation? I don't know what to think anymore, Mom. All I know is that my wife is pregnant, and she's stressed, and she cries every night because she's worried about what people are saying about us. Her parents barely speak to me now. Her father thinks I'm either a liar or an idiot who didn't know his own mother was making things up. Do you understand what that's like? Do you understand what it's like? I said, my voice rising, to work 2 jobs for 15 years so your child can have a better life than you did, only to be told that the life you built isn't good enough to acknowledge. Do you understand what it's like to be asked to pretend you're someone else because who you really are is embarrassing? That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Silence stretched between us, painful and thick. Little did they know I was 3 steps ahead. I whispered to myself after hanging up, because here's what I had realized during those phone calls and that documentation. I wasn't just fighting for access to my grandchild. I was fighting for my son to remember who I really was and what I had really done for him, and I had proof, not just text messages and receipts, but years of sacrifice, documented in school records, bank statements, and the simple fact that he had graduated from college debt, free while I still drove a car with 200 0 miles on it. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly gathered more evidence. I pulled my tax returns from the years Marcus was in college, showing my 2 jobs and my modest income. I found his college tuition bills with my name on every payment. I even found the essay he'd written for a scholarship application his senior year of high school, in which he'd written, "My mother is my hero. She works harder than anyone I know, and she never complains. She taught me that success isn't about money or status. It's about character and kindness." I made copies of everything and put them in a folder that mirrored the one Vanessa had given me, except this one contained truth instead of scripts. Then I did something that surprised even me. I hired a lawyer. His name was Martin Rodriguez, and he specialized in family law and elder rights. When I told him the situation, he listened carefully, occasionally making notes in a leather portfolio. "Do you have documentation?" he asked when I finished. I slid my folder across his desk. Everything. He spent 20 minutes reviewing it, his expression growing more interested as he read. Finally, he looked up. "Mrs. Henderson, this is good. This is very good. They're going to have a hard time arguing that you acted with malicious intent or poor judgment when they were the architects of the deception. The text messages alone show a clear pattern of instruction and pressure. Can they really keep me from my grandchild?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "They can try," he said, "but grandparents' rights laws in this state are fairly strong, especially when there's an established relationship with the parent. You've maintained a relationship with your son his entire life. You have no history of abuse, neglect, or harmful behavior. Their only argument is this wedding incident, and we have substantial evidence that you were acting under duress and direct instruction from them. Relief flooded through me. So what do? We wait, he said. Let them make the first move. If they file to restrict your visitation rights before the child is even born, it's going to look vindictive and unreasonable. In the meantime, I'm going to draft a letter to their attorney explaining our position and providing copies of the evidence. Sometimes that's enough to make people reconsider. I left his office feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Not hope that everything would go back to the way it was. I knew that was impossible. But hope that I wouldn't lose everything. Hope that the truth still mattered. What I didn't know was that Vanessa was about to make a move that would change the entire game. 6 weeks after that terrible confrontation in their apartment, I received a text from Marcus. Family dinner at Vanessa's parents' house this Sunday, 6 p.m. You need to be there. No, please. No explanation, just a command. I called him immediately. What is this about? Just come, Mom. It's important. Is this about the baby, about the legal stuff? Sunday, 6 p.m. Please, he hung up. I sat with that phone in my hand for a long time, my instincts screaming that this was a trap. But he was my son, and he'd said please, and I could not go. I called Martin. Rodriguez, they've invited me to a family dinner at the daughter-in-law's parents' house. I think something's happening. Don't go alone, he said immediately. Do you have a friend who could accompany you? Someone who could serve as a witness? I thought about it. My friend Joyce from work had been listening to this whole saga unfold over our lunch breaks. She'd been appalled on my behalf, outraged by what Marcus and Vanessa had asked me to do. I have someone. I said, bring them and keep your phone on record in your pocket, just in case. If they're planning some kind of confrontation, or if they try to get you to sign something, I want evidence. Sunday came and Joyce picked me up in her car, dressed nicely but not ostentatiously. You ready for this? She asked. No. I said honestly, but I'm going anyway. The Crane family home was even more impressive than the country club, had been a sprawling estate with a circular driveway, manicured gardens, and a fountain that played classical music. Joyce whistled low, well la-da-da. We rang the bell, and a young woman in a catering uniform answered, directing us to the West Dining Room. West Dining Room. Like they had more than one. The room we entered was formal and intimidating, with a long mahogany table set for what looked like a dinner party. But it wasn't a party. Seated around the table were Marcus and Vanessa, Patricia and Richard Crane, and 3 people I didn't recognize, 2 men in suits and a woman with a leather portfolio. Lawyers. They'd brought lawyers to a family dinner. Mom, Marcus stood up, looking uncomfortable. Thanks for coming. Who's this? This is my friend Joyce, I said calmly. I hope you don't mind that I brought a guest. You didn't specify it was a private meeting. Vanessa's mouth tightened. We were hoping this could be family only. Joyce is like family, I said, not moving toward the table. What's going on here? Richard Crane stood, gesturing to the chairs. Please sit. We have some things to discuss. Joyce and I sat at the end of the table, opposite the lawyers. I pulled my phone out and set it on the table in front of me, very visibly opening the voice recording app. I'm going to record this conversation, just so everyone's clear on what's said. That won't be necessary, Patricia began. It's legal in this state, I said quietly, and it's not negotiable. If we're having a meeting with lawyers present, I'm documenting it. One of the suited men nodded. That's within her rights. Richard cleared his throat. We've asked you here because Vanessa and Marcus have some concerns about how we all move forward as a family, given the incident at the wedding and the breach of trust that occurred. We think it's important to establish some clear boundaries and expectations. What kind of boundaries? I asked, keeping my voice steady. The woman with the portfolio, one of their lawyers, I assumed, spoke up. Mr. and Mrs. Crane, along with Marcus and Vanessa, are proposing a formal agreement regarding your relationship with the child that Vanessa is expecting. The agreement would stipulate supervised visitation only, with visits limited to once per month for no more than 2 hours, always in the presence of either Marcus or Vanessa. My heart sank, but I kept my expression neutral. Supervised visitation, like I'm a danger to a child I haven't even met yet. Not a danger, Vanessa said quickly, but given your demonstrated issues with honesty and judgment, my demonstrated issues, I repeated slowly. The ones where I did exactly what you and Marcus asked me to do. Vanessa's face flushed. You took it way too far. We asked you to be a little vague about your work, and you created an entire fake persona. Vanessa, I said, pulling out my phone and opening my photo gallery. Let me read you something. I found the screenshot of one of her texts. Tell people you're a retired healthcare consultant, specialized in hospital administration. That's word for word what you texted to Marcus to send to me. Would you like me to read more? The table went silent. I pulled out the folder I'd brought with me. My folder, the one with all the evidence. I have every text message, every instruction, the receipt for the $1,800 dress you bought me because my clothes weren't good enough. The note you wrote telling me I was playing a role, and not to forget my lines. Security camera footage from the cafe, where you coached me on what to say. All of it. I slid the folder across the table to the lawyers. You want to talk about issues with honesty and judgment. Let's talk about who orchestrated that deception and who just followed the script she was given. Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. Richard was staring at Vanessa with an expression I couldn't quite read. Marcus had his head in his hands. Furthermore, I continued, feeling stronger with every word. I've retained my own legal counsel, Martin Rodriguez with Rodriguez and Associates. He specializes in grandparents' rights and elder law. He's reviewed all of this evidence, and he's prepared to file a counter petition if you move forward with restricting my access to my grandchild based on false pretenses. The male lawyer was flipping through my folder now, his expression growing more serious with each page. He leaned over and whispered something to Richard. Everything was about to change, and they had no idea it was coming. I'd thought on the drive over, but now it was here, and I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry, righteously, justifiably angry. I did what you asked me to do, I said, looking directly at Vanessa. I wore the costume. I memorized the lines. I played the role of the successful, wealthy mother because you told me that was the only way I'd be acceptable at your wedding. And now you want to punish me for it. You want to use my compliance against me, like I did something wrong by trying to protect my son from your family's judgment. Me, Richard started. I'm not finished, I said, and something in my voice made him stop. I worked 2 jobs for 15 years to put Marcus through college. I lived in a small apartment and drove an old car and saved every penny so he could graduate without debt. I sacrificed every luxury, every comfort, every dream I had for myself so that he could have opportunities I never had. And I did it joyfully because that's what mothers do. That's what love looks like. Tears were running down my face now, but my voice stayed strong. I am not ashamed of my work. I am not ashamed of my home or my car or my simple life. The only thing I'm ashamed of is that I let you make me feel like I needed to hide it. That I let you convince me that serving food to sick people in a hospital cafeteria was something embarrassing instead of what it really is. Honest, necessary work that helps people on some of their hardest days. I stood up and Joyce stood with me. So here's what's going to happen, I said. You can accept me as I am. Me, Henderson, cafeteria worker, apartment dweller, proud mother and soon-to-be grandmother. Or you can try to keep me from my family. But if you choose that second option, I will fight you with every resource I have, and I will win because the truth is on my side. I looked at Marcus, who was crying now. I love you, son. I always will. But I'm done pretending to be someone I'm not, even for you. The silence that followed my speech felt like it lasted forever. Patricia was pale, Richard looked troubled, and the lawyers were whispering to each other urgently. But it was Marcus who finally spoke. "Mom, His voice broke. I didn't know. I didn't realize how specific Vanessa had been with the instructions. I thought," he looked at his wife, "you told me you'd just given her some gentle guidance, some suggestions. You made it sound like she'd gone overboard on her own." Vanessa's face went from flushed to white. "I was trying to help her fit in. Your mother didn't know how to act around people like my family. Someone had to teach her to lie," Marcus said, and I heard something new in his voice. "Anger? Teach her to be ashamed of the life she lived while she was raising me." "Marcus, you know how my parents are," Vanessa said desperately. "You know how important appearances are in our circle." "I was trying to make things easier for everyone by making my mother into someone she's not." Marcus stood up, his hands shaking. "By giving her a script and a costume and making her feel like she wasn't good enough. Your mother worked in a cafeteria." Vanessa's voice rose, her careful control finally cracking. "Do you know what my friends would have said if they'd known? Do you know how that would have reflected on us? She worked 2 jobs to put me through college." Marcus shouted back. "She sacrificed everything for me, and you made her feel like that was something to be ashamed of." Richard stood up now, his face grave. "Vanessa Marie Crane, is everything in this folder accurate? Did you give me these specific instructions about what to say and how to present herself?" Vanessa looked at her father, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. "Daddy, I was just trying to help Marcus. His background is so different from ours. I didn't want people to judge him." "So you created an elaborate deception and then blamed it on his mother when your plan backfired?" Richard's voice was cold in a way I imagined made people in boardrooms very nervous. "Do you understand what you've done? Do you understand the position you've put this family in?" Patricia spoke up, her voice tight. "Richard, she was trying to protect the family's reputation. By lying to me." Richard turned to his wife. "By lying to our friends and business associates. By creating a fiction that could have been exposed at any moment and made us all look like fools." He turned back to Vanessa. "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking that I didn't want to be embarrassed." Vanessa's voice broke into something raw and desperate. "I was thinking that I worked hard to build my reputation and my social standing, and I didn't want it tainted by." She gestured at me vaguely. "By me," I finished quietly, "by a woman who serves food for a living, by someone who isn't rich or important or connected." Vanessa didn't deny it. Marcus was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. "This is who you are? This is what matters to you? My mother's paycheck and her address?" "You don't understand," Vanessa said, tears starting to flow. "You grew up without money. You don't know what it's like to have everything and then risk losing it because people find out you married. Beneath you," the words hung in the air like poison. "Get out," Richard said quietly. We all turned to him. "Vanessa, go upstairs. You too, Marcus." "We need to speak with me privately." Vanessa looked stunned. "But Daddy now." Marcus stood slowly, gave me one unreadable look, and guided his sobbing wife out of the room. We listened to their footsteps on the stairs, and then there was silence. Richard sat down heavily, suddenly looking much older. Patricia was crying quietly into a handkerchief. The lawyers looked uncomfortable, like they wished they could disappear. "Me," Richard said finally. "I owe you an apology, a profound one. My daughter orchestrated this deception, and then she attempted to use it against you to limit your relationship with your grandchild. That's unconscionable." I didn't know what to say. "I come from modest means myself," he continued. "My father was a mechanic. My mother cleaned houses. I worked my way through community college and then night school for my business degree. Everything I have, I built. I thought I'd raised my daughter to understand the value of hard work and to respect people regardless of their economic status. Clearly, I failed." Patricia made a small sound of protest, but Richard held up a hand. "We failed," he corrected. "Somewhere along the way, We taught Vanessa that appearances matter more than character, that social standing matters more than integrity, and I am deeply, deeply sorry that you became the victim of those warped values. He picked up my folder and handed it to one of the lawyers. This petition for restricted visitation is withdrawn, effective immediately. In fact, he looked at the female lawyer. I want to establish unrestricted grandparent rights for me, whatever the strongest protection is under state law. The lawyer nodded. I'll draft the documents. I felt tears coming again, but these were different. These were relief. Furthermore, Richard continued, I'm going to insist that Vanessa begin therapy, individual therapy, to address whatever deep-seated issues are driving this behavior. And marriage counseling with Marcus, because after what I just heard, I'm not sure their relationship is built on a healthy foundation. He turned to me directly. I would like to get to know you, the real you. I would like to invite you to dinner, not here, somewhere neutral, so we can have a conversation as the grandparents of this child that's coming. Can we do that? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Patricia spoke up then, her voice shaky. I'm sorry too, I knew something felt wrong about your story at the wedding. I should have said something then, or talked to Vanessa privately, instead of having Richard investigate you. That was cruel, and I apologize. Thank you, I managed to say. Richard stood and extended his hand. I shook it, feeling the strength in his grip. The lawyers will be in touch with your lawyer to formalize the grandparent rights. You will have unrestricted access to your grandchild, You have my word. Joyce and I left that house in a daze. We sat in her car in the circular driveway for a full 5 minutes before either of us spoke. Holy hell, Joyce finally said. I started laughing, and then I was crying, and then I was doing both at once, while Joyce patted my shoulder and made soothing sounds. My phone buzzed with a text. Marcus, can we talk? Just the two of us. Yes, I texted back, whenever you're ready. Marcus came to my apartment 3 days later. It was the first time he'd been there in over a year, and I watched him look around with new eyes, not judgment this time, but something else. Maybe recognition. It's smaller than I remembered, he said softly. Or you got used to bigger. I replied, not unkindly. We sat on my worn couch, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. I was ashamed. Marcus finally said, when I started dating Vanessa and met her family and her friends, I was ashamed of where I came from, not of you, never of you, but of everything, the apartment, the car, the fact that you worked in a cafeteria, and I hated myself for feeling that way, but I felt it anyway. I reached over and took his hand. I know, baby. When Vanessa suggested that you could maybe present yourself differently at the wedding, it felt like a solution. Like I could have both things, my successful life with her and you, without having to explain the gap between them. I convinced myself I was protecting you from judgment, but really I was protecting myself from embarrassment. I know that too. He looked at me with red, rimmed eyes. How can you not hate me? Because you're my son, I said simply, and because everyone makes mistakes when they're trying to figure out who they are. You were caught between two worlds, Marcus. I get that, but you have to decide which world has more truth in it. The one you built for me, he said immediately. The one where work is honorable and love is more important than appearances and people are judged by their character, not their bank accounts. That's the world I want my child to grow up in. Then that's the world you need to create. I don't know if Vanessa can live in that world, he said quietly. We've been fighting constantly since that dinner. She thinks her father betrayed her by taking your side. She can't understand why everyone is angry at her instead of you. She keeps saying she was trying to help. Therapy might help her understand. I offered, though I wasn't sure I believed it, maybe. Or maybe we're just too different. He squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it, for asking you to hide who you are, for not defending you when Vanessa attacked you, for ever making you feel like you weren't enough. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. But Marcus, you need to make a promise to me. Anything. Never teach your child to be ashamed of honest work. Never teach them that money is more important than integrity. And never, ever ask them to hide who they are to make someone else comfortable. He pulled me into a hug and we both cried. 6 months later, I held my grandson for the first time. His name is David, after his grandfather, my late husband. Marcus insisted on it. The christening was a small affair at a church, not a country club. Vanessa's parents were there, warm and welcoming to me in a way that felt genuine. Patricia had started inviting me to lunch once a month, and we were slowly building a relationship that felt real. Richard told me stories about his mechanic father and asked about my work at the hospital with actual interest. Vanessa herself was complicated. She was in therapy, which Marcus said was helping. She was cordial to me, but not warm. I didn't expect warmth. And I didn't need it. What I needed was for her to treat me with basic respect and to let me be a grandmother to David. So far, she was doing that. Marcus had changed too. He'd started coming by my apartment regularly again, sometimes bringing David, sometimes coming alone just to talk. We'd rebuilt something between us, and while it wasn't exactly what it had been before, it was perhaps more honest, more real. Looking back on the whole experience, I've learned some things I wish I'd understood sooner. I learned that silence doesn't mean weakness. When I finally spoke up and defended myself with evidence and truth, I was more powerful than I'd ever been when I was trying to please everyone. I learned that family isn't about blood alone. It's about respect and acceptance. Joyce, my friend from the cafeteria, had shown me more loyalty during that dinner than my own son had in the weeks before it. Real family shows up for you regardless of whether it's convenient. I learned that love shouldn't require you to diminish yourself. If someone truly loves you, they won't ask you to pretend to be someone else. And if they do ask, it's okay to say no, even when it's hard. Most importantly, I learned that my life, my real life, with its modest apartment and cafeteria job and secondhand furniture, was never something to be ashamed of. It was proof of my strength, my dedication, and my ability to provide for someone I loved more than myself. That's not a source of shame, that's a source of pride. If you're going through something similar, if someone in your life is asking you to hide who you are or pretend to be someone you're not, I want you to know this: you are enough, exactly as you are. Your worth isn't determined by your job title, your address, your bank account, or your social connections. Your worth comes from who you are when nobody's watching, from your integrity, your kindness, your ability to love and sacrifice and persevere. And if people can't see that worth, if they need you to dress it up in expensive clothes and false credentials before they'll respect it, then the problem isn't you, it's them. I still work in the hospital cafeteria. I still live in my apartment and drive my aging Honda. But now, when I serve food to doctors and nurses and visitors, I do it with my head held high, because I know that my work matters. I know that I matter, and nobody can take that knowledge away from me again. Little David is 5 months old now, and he doesn't care that Grandma Me doesn't live in a mansion. When I hold him and sing him lullabies, he looks at me with perfect trust and love. That's the only approval I need. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. Have you ever been asked to hide who you really are? How did you handle it? Did you find the courage to be yourself? Remember, every story has a lesson, and yours might be just beginning. Don't be afraid to write it with truth instead of fiction. The authentic life is always better than the pretend one, even when it's harder. This is me, reminding you that cafeteria workers are people with dignity and stories and value, and so are you, no matter what you do or where you live. Thank you for listening. God bless. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. Have you had to set boundaries with family? Have you had to choose yourself when someone you loved was taking advantage? You're not alone in this. So many of us have walked this road. Remember, every story has a lesson, and yours might be just beginning. But whatever chapter you're in, know this: you are valuable, you are worthy, and you deserve to be treated with dignity and respect.